What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review Deathstroke Knights and Dragons, which came out today on VOD and is coming out on Blu-ray later this month. The movie was initially produced as a series of animated shorts, which played on CW Seed, and I didn't see those 5 shorts at the time of their release. I think it was back in January of this year, but now they've been fleshed out into a full feature film, roughly an hour and a half in length, with about 50 minutes of new footage, including an ending. But the movie stars the great Michael Chiklis as Slade Wilson, aka Deathstroke, who for me is one of the most iconic villains in all of DC Comics. He's been portrayed by a variety of actors, both on the big and the small screen, and he's joined in this story by a lot of other great DC characters like Shiva, Bronze Tiger, Jericho, as well as 2 characters who, in the comics at least, have previously worn the mantle of the Ravager. I should also mention that this movie is straight up rated R for bloody violence and gore, and it absolutely earns its rating with tons of blood and eviscerations and decapitations throughout the movie. And there's even a little sexual content, so if your dream in this life has been to see Deathstroke's butt cheeks while he's making love, well, now's your chance. Actually, come to think of it, I think he appears nude a couple times in the movie. At any rate, this movie uses a ton of material from the Judas Contract storyline, which was fleshed out in the comic Teen Titans way back in 1984, which I was actually reading in real time at the age of 8. But this movie jumps around to a lot of different points in Slade Wilson's life. We get to see his origin story and how he received his enhanced abilities. We also see how much of a failure he was as a husband to the woman who trained him to be the mercenary that we all know and love. In particular, and this comes straight out of the comics, when he fails to protect his son after he's kidnapped by a villain known as the Jackal, which is how Slade Wilson's son, both in the comics as well as in this movie, ends up with his throat cut, becoming a mute. Teen Titans 44 fleshed out that story in great detail, but mostly this movie is all about the Jackal's return and his attempt to use the children of Deathstroke as pawns in his terrorist organization Hive, all in an effort to take over the world. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, you'll know that I've got a very high opinion of Warner Brothers Animation and how they've handled the DC universe, but I'm the first to acknowledge that when it comes to their output, their movies and shows definitely have their ups and downs and peaks and valleys like anybody else. And I think I'd place this movie somewhere around the middle of the pack, maybe a little lower, because while the movie has these insane action sequences that are absolutely incredible to watch with glorious choreography, the flip side is that there are a lot of sections of this movie where the story really drags, where we almost veer into like daytime soap opera territory with some of the confrontations between the characters. And even worse, at times the animation feels a little rudimentary or phoned in. It definitely doesn't have the production value of a movie like Justice League Dark Apokolips War, which came out earlier this year, which for me in a lot of ways represents the high watermark of what Warner Brothers Animation has been able to do with all these DC characters. But all grievances about the movie's shortcomings aside, I did enjoy it, I just didn't love it. Watching Deathstroke hack his enemies into slices of cheese is always a good time, and I also totally support Warner Brothers' efforts to continue pushing their animation into adult territory, with a scene where we quite literally see Deathstroke conceiving his daughter. But best of all, I love seeing an anti-hero, some would call him a villain, taking center stage. In the superhero genre, so rarely do we get a chance to see a really cool, charismatic villain as the hero of the story. I think that's one of the reasons that Avengers Infinity War was so popular, is because so much of that movie was all about Thanos and seeing that struggle through his eyes. And in this particular animated movie, we really see Deathstroke being put through his paces. He gets chewed up by his foes on more than one occasion. And I think on the whole, most fans of the characters are going to be pretty happy with how he's portrayed in this movie. But if I was going to sit down the uninitiated, someone who is not familiar with the DC animated universe, I wouldn't necessarily pick this as the first movie to show them. They've cranked out so many great shows and movies over the years, I'd probably start them with something like Justice League Unlimited. But let's be honest, with so many movies being delayed right now, I was just thrilled to have something new to sink my teeth into, something new to watch. But I can't wrap up this review without making some recommendations in the world of comics, because obviously without the original source material, none of these animated movies would exist. And my first encounters with the character of Deathstroke were way back in the early 80s in the pages of New Teen Titans, as well as in the amazing crossover between the Uncanny X-Men and the New Teen Titans, where Deathstroke basically mops the floor with everybody's favorite merry band of mutants. But one of the stories that really got to me with the character was Identity Crisis back in 2004, where in one issue, Slade Wilson takes on several members of the Justice League and seriously tears them to pieces before they finally manage to overwhelm them with superior numbers. So some people don't like Identity Crisis because it's a little too raw and visceral for their tastes, but I wish the world of comics would recruit best-selling authors more often to come into the world of comics and give the world of superheroes those ingredients that you typically find in best-selling fiction. But I'm starting to veer off topic. I think I've said all I have to say about this particular movie. If you saw the trailer and it grabbed you, you'll probably have a good time. But just keep your expectations relatively modest. This is not a home run movie, but as a fan of DC Comics, it was totally worth 90 minutes of my time. Also, if you're in the mood for some more commentary related to DC content, definitely check out my new top 10 list that I posted last night, where I count down my top 10 favorite stories featuring the villain of Darkseid. If you're into DC and villains, I promise it'll be right up your alley. But that's all I've got for now, so I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell, and if you want to talk more about comics or movies or whatever, you can always find me day or night on Twitter at Colbrex. But I can't thank you enough for watching the video. I really appreciate it, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.